and welcome back. I appreciate you all joining me here on this lovely Thursday. So we got like the last Thursday of the year. We're wrapping it up, speeding on into the new year. So lots of expected changes happening next year. Super excited for where we're going to be as an agency. But yeah, I appreciate you all joining us. Depending on how many questions, I've booked about an hour for me to be here. So for those of you newly turning in, the format is basically an Ask Me Anything, specifically around Amazon advertising, because that is my area of expertise. And so we always get a lot of really awesome questions. And so you're going to be able to use the chat box, type in all of your questions. I will get them up on screen and I will make sure that you can get the best possible answer for those questions. And I have noticed a little bit of a weirdness when it comes to LinkedIn. So for full disclosure, I'm using StreamYard to stream these on Facebook as well as LinkedIn and YouTube. And I'm noticing some weirdness inside of LinkedIn that if you've already typed in a question before sort of this gets started, sometimes those early questions don't get I can't see them in the chat, in the aggregated chat that I'm looking at. So if you would like, maybe try re-asking it if I don't get to the question. So apologies for any weirdness on there. I think the best connection is probably over on YouTube if you want to go hop in, and I can post the link to YouTube here as well, because I think I get most viewers on LinkedIn, but you all, and honestly, I don't know if my mass comments even get posted over on LinkedIn, which is a little bit strange again. So I'm seeing, I'm seeing some comments over here on LinkedIn and I'm not seeing them come through in my chat. So I'm going to see if I can just keep this up over here. Unfortunately, yeah, so just a lot of people saying they're excited. Yep. So we appreciate all the interaction over on LinkedIn. I'm going to post a comment over there. Yeah, but the best place to catch all of the replays of these are definitely going to be on YouTube. So cool. Yeah, if anyone has any Amazon ad questions, again, feel free to pop over, type those into the chat box. That's how you can get your questions answered. Otherwise, maybe I'll go over some quick trends that we're seeing in the accounts right now. So actually, most of our accounts, right before Christmas, there was definitely a drop in the sales that has to do with the decreases in or extensions in the ship times, which means people weren't going to get stuff over by Christmas. And so consequently, the sales drop. We see that every single year. We try to anticipate that. Now, as good as you are anticipating those and as frequently as you make changes, you will always see an ACoS or a total ACoS spike of some level. And the question is, how big of a spike and how quickly can you get it under control? And so pro tip for those of you seeing those trends in your account, a couple things that you want to do. And one thing that you definitely want to make sure that you're doing is looking at your daily trends. You want to be checking your accounts daily, identifying, so the sales have gone down. How has my spend been adjusted in relation to my sales? Because oftentimes what we see in this time is that sales have gone down, and yes, spend has decreased just a lot of times naturally just due to changes in consumer behavior, but the account managers may or may not have made significant enough adjustments to spend to be able to sort of stem off that total ACoS spike. So by now, you should be able to start kind of getting that under control. How you would go and get that under control is by making frequent changes looking at shorter time horizons, meaning, so we were auditing one account internally today, and we were noticing a spike around the 20th. And so when we now go in to make our optimizations to decrease the spend, we're not going to be accounting for any of the performance data that's before the 20th, because all of that data, ACoS and total ACoS and all of that were great. So if you're looking at very long time horizons, when you're making those adjustments, you're going to be calculating in the really good performance that you had in the beginning of December. And you're going to be adjusting off of that, which is going to consequently cause you to increase things that shouldn't be increased, because the good performance and, just mainly due to, again, consumer behavior is not going to be there. So you want to make sure that you're adjusting. And actually that sort of thing, looking at shorter time horizons, what is happening right now, adjusting off of that, making sure that you're adjusting spend for changes in the sales trends, that sort of workflow is going to be applicable right after, like, say, shopping days like Prime Day, or if you have a seasonal product that works really well, let's say Halloween, or other times, after Mother's Day, Father's Day, all of those times where you see that drop off, again, due to changes in consumer behavior, not necessarily an issue with the products. You want to be adopting that into your workflow. You always want to check accounts daily to get an idea of the trends. If you are checking accounts daily, that means you can probably catch your trends within probably about 48 hours, maybe 3 days, versus if you only check, say, once a week, you're going to be missing out on a lot of those trends. Hey, John, what's up? New camera angle, who this? Yes, I don't know if it's a new camera angle. I turned the lights on here, so yeah, definitely. I think changes in the lighting and cameras might be something that's I might tackle in 2024. I haven't decided yet if I care enough. Thankfully, I think the audio is pretty good, although I really could stand something that would take care of background noise, if I'm being honest. Terry here with a couple of good questions. So if you're already ranked number 1 or 2 organically, do you still typically go for the top of search with your ad spend? That is a good question. It depends on the performance of that. So if you're getting really good top of search performance, and when I say performance, I mean in terms of sales, and ACoS is something that you can sustain at top of search, I don't really see an issue with going after that if that's where the performance is. Now, where I wouldn't recommend going after the top ad spots is if you're already ranked 1 and 2, and then you are having to run at that top of search placement with an ACoS that just doesn't make sense from a sustainability or profitability standpoint. In that case, I would test, lowering bids. Can I pay a little bit less? Can I get a little bit more profitability? And then what you want to do in relation to those changes is you watch your keyword rankings on those targets that you're making those adjustments to, and then you would watch your sales trends of the overall product. You're not going to be able to get sales on a per search level. I know there's search query performance report, which I just saw a question pop in the screen about search query performance. So that's awesome. I'll make sure to get to that one. But I would, you're not going to be able to get that granular, but what you can get an idea of is what, again, are my overall sales trends. And if that's a keyword that is very important to sort of the sales of your brand, then if you start to drop off, you'll also see that impact to the total sales. So I would watch those two things whenever I'm making changes. And another pro tip is if you have something that you're ranked very well on, and you're trying to figure out, like, okay, I feel like I really should lower my ad spend here because I'm already ranked well, I never recommend making very significant changes to things that are very important to the sales of your brand. Meaning, if it is a main keyword and you're wanting to test something, do not test just pausing it. You want to slowly dial down the knob, mostly in the form of adjusting bids slightly lower or potentially capping your budgets for that campaign to see what the impact is. Of course, just slightly lowering the ad spend, and that way you shouldn't like completely drop off the page. You would just see a slight drop off. Now, how significant and how fast of a drop off you see with, again, dialing down what you're doing with main keywords will depend on how competitive that keywords are. There are some keywords where you dial it down just a smidge and you're just off the map, versus other ones you just see sort of a slow decline, or just sort of, it just kind of equalizes. A great question, Terry. I appreciate it. And Terry, with another question, would you pause a keyword that are under a certain conversion rate or very high ACoS, even if they're irrelevant? No, I would not. What we typically do is we would lower the bids. Worst case scenario, your bids are going to be so low you don't get impressions and you've effectively paused it anyways. But what that does, it's a nice middle ground where you can potentially get some visibility on something, but you're not paying as significantly for it. And it's possible to have a great ACoS and a crappy conversion rates, providing your cost per click is low enough. And so lowering the bid is going to help that. All right, cool. Dual says, I'm struggling with search query performance report, having a hard time using all the data to see where I'm lacking, or how can I use it to increase my sales? All the data is very overwhelming. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. It is a lot. So that has been a theme with Amazon, is putting out more and more data, which we love. It also means analytics has gotten a lot more complicated and a lot more factors to keep in mind. I wouldn't overthink it. Your optimizations inside of your usual workflows, meaning finding things that convert well, making sure that you have a good enough presence on them to make an impact on your organic ranking, make sure you're optimizing your bids and your budgets, adding negative keywords. None of that good practices have changed. They will never change. The only thing that has been added, and maybe I'm kind of like downplaying this report. Like, it's an insane report, and the amount of information you can pull out of it is a lot. But kind of what you're discovering is that it's really difficult, and you feel like you're missing out on everything. What you want to think about is, like, I would try and dig in on your main products. Like the products that you really know that you can spend time on, you want to put the extra effort, any extra effort is going to be rewarded. That is where you're going to be able to make sense of things, and you're not going to get so distracted that you try and put together like the most insane reports across everything in your entire account, because that's going to be way too much for you to wrap your head around. So I would dig in there, and then what you want to look for is, where do you have better performance than the averages or your competitors? That's going to help you zero in on the things that make sense for you to go after. So one workflow that a lot of people will do is they will look at, the conversion rates, the click-through rates, and where Amazon is saying that it is a very important keyword to your brand. And what they'll then do is take the advertising reports and then look at their impression share, so the search term impression share reports, to determine if they are if there's room for them to increase the impression share, again, using search query performance to validate a keyword that they are performing well on. And the reason why that's such a powerful connection is because search query will include both ads and the organic, and it overlays your performance versus competitors. And that's why it's such a powerful report to be able to use. So I would just sort of try and look at that analysis, just say, can I find one or two keywords in the search query report that I could then go and take a look at my ads? Because that whole workflow, I'm saying it's super easy. Like, yeah, figure out the keywords that work and then go look at the search query impression share. You have to wrap your head around, How do I even read the search query reports? How do I identify which keywords are better for me? How do I then take that information and then map it across the search query performance? And I have to wrap my head around the data in, the search query or search term impression share report. And then I have to go in and like find out where those keywords are in my ad account and then get strategic with my bids. That whole workflow is really cumbersome, and there's a lot of learning points or learning that you have to have in that. So I wouldn't overthink it. I would look at your again, main products, see if you can find a couple keywords, get super strategic, and then that will sort of help you get into a comfortable workflow, which you can then roll out across, say, other products or new product launches or anything like that. So hopefully that was helpful. I appreciate the question though, because I too, you get these new reports, everyone says they're amazing, which they are, and then you go in to try and use them and you get stumped because it's really complicated and frankly a little bit hard to understand and digest sometimes. Cool. Valar says, thank you for your content. I appreciate you guys coming. These are honestly, I've said it last week, I will say it again. This is my favorite hour of the week. One of my favorite things to do is try and simplify the complex monster that is Amazon advertising. So I appreciate everyone showing up. I would not be here. We would not have this discussion without you guys' awesome questions. So I very much appreciate it. But I followed up with another question, which, by the way, if you have any questions on Amazon advertising, the format is an Ask Me Anything format. So feel free to type your question in the chat, and then I will pull it up on screen, and we will get those questions answered for you. So your question is, I have a question regarding campaign management for products with a large number of variations, particularly those with over 50 different variation sizes and colors. Yes, lots. Such as shoes or clothing. Fun accounts to be in, ones that we have lots of experience with and honest. So in your experience, do you notice any significant difference in the performance of the management strategies between ASINs and different sizes within the same product line? The answer is yes, and it's actually quite surprising. So for example, you will have it seems like the exact same product, right? Just a different color, and yet you will let's see. Let me make sure I answer your question. Do you notice any significant differences in the performance or management strategies between ASINs of different sizes? Yes. So you will have your best sellers, which sometimes do not make any sense. Meaning like it's one random small blue one is the one that works the best, but that's just the one that works the best. So you are going to have sort of your best sellers in terms of your just overall account. So let's say business reports, or if you're looking at specifically the ad performance. Now, the way that we help make sense of the performance data in accounts where the different products, like you said, there's a ton of different sizes, adding colors to that, it gets really complicated, is we will roll up the performance to the parent ASIN and try and make sense of accounts that way, right? Because there are certain accounts where, you might have like 20,000 SKUs, but if you roll that up to say a parent ASIN level, you're dealing with something much more manageable, still in probably the thousands range, but at least that's more manageable than say 20,000. And so what you would want to do, the reason why you would do that is because due to the way that the ad attribution works, meaning the sale is attributed to the product that got the click, which may not necessarily be the product that got the final purchase, then the total ACoS and ad sale percentage can get a little bit wonky if you're looking at it on a, say, per SKU level versus if you rolled up to the parent ASIN. I've seen this all the time where there's a particular product that may be acting as, say, quote, a funnel, meaning everyone's clicking on it. We've seen this actually, like there was one product, I think it was home goods, where they had an orange variation. Everyone clicked on the orange variation. The orange variation performs the best in ads, but everybody bought the black one. So when you looked at the total ACoS for that particular ASIN, what happened is it looked terrible because, again, no one's making the purchase of the orange one. So you didn't see those sales registering in the business reports versus the black one seemed like it was crushing it because we had relatively no ad spend on it. Because if we looked at the overall product just inside the ad console, it didn't seem like it was performing. But if we went and looked at the business reports, it was far outperforming. So you can end up with like very strange data points, which would lead you to sort of incorrect conclusions. So for example, in that other example, if we were only looking at, say, the information on a child ASIN level, we would have said, like, oh, we need to stop advertising this because total ACoS is terrible. And so we did test that, right? We did test advertising the black one, and what we found is just that the performance wasn't that great. And so to help make sense of it all, we would roll it up to the parent ASIN level, which then your total ACoS and your ad sale percentage and all of that will kind of get flattened out and averaged across everything on the listing, and that will be much more helpful to advertise. So if you want a much more extensive walkthrough of how we advertise for variation listings, we have a whole video on our YouTube channel. Highly recommend you go and check that out. I think it's like advertising or for variations. The way that we'll do it is we'll take the best sellers and we will advertise those on what we call, quote, generic keywords, meaning like, okay, so metal cup, right? I have no indication if they want a specific color, if they want a size, what do they want? I have no idea. So those are going to go into my like more generic bucket, and those are going to be connected with the best sellers. However, you will find places where the search terms are very specific to a particular variation, meaning, like small women's pink shirt. That is very descriptive. And then what we'll do is we will connect those with the variation that best suits that shopper query and put those in a specific campaign. And then we found that there to be really, really good performance doing things that way. So I appreciate the question. I know that was a long answer, but hopefully that answered your question. And if you have any sort of like follow-up or points you want to clarify, feel free to use the chat box again. Cool. All right. SuperF. I love the name. I'm assuming that's not your given name. Yeah, he said I had a negative out a couple of highly relevant keywords and phrase match that resulted in very high ACoS during launch. I think this is typical due to the ASIN having no reviews. Now the ASIN has, there's a part 2, 40 reviews and a good conversion rate in the Amazon Choice Badge. Is a good practice to archive these negative keywords and reactivate them to test conversions at this point. It's not a bad idea to test. The other option would be to, instead of if that original campaign is working very well, that is containing the negatives, you might just take out those searches and then test them in a new campaign. That way you can kind of like segment what you're doing. And I don't think that would be a bad idea. If it's easier just to archive them in the original campaign, then you might test that as well. And yeah, I would say it's not a bad idea to test. And I would agree with you. If the conversion rates of the products are a little bit lower due to reviews, maybe you've adjusted price point, maybe you've done a lot of other like optimizations to the listings, then most likely other things will perform a lot better, and it's not a bad idea to test them. Just a slight caveat here is whenever you are introducing tests into the account, you are introducing new ad spend, and that new ad spend is going to be, it's a test. So it may or may not be even as good as, say, the overall averages. So if you're dealing with a time where there's a lot of volatility in the account, particularly around this time, right? This whole weird last week, it feels like no one knows what day it is, and all our diets are completely off. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself here. Consumer behavior is up and down and everything's kind of crazy. Well, if I introduced a test right now, I'm introducing a lot more volatility and additional ad spend into the account. So I would kind of also wait to do those tests until things level off slightly. Cool. So Ali asked, what advice do you have for setting up ad groups and campaign for optimal performance? Good question. So our rule of thumb is 1 campaign, 1 ad group. I'm not a fan of multiple ad groups. There's always a time and a place for everything. And then the other thing is that we will rarely have more than one listing advertised in a campaign. The reason why I don't say more than one ASIN or product is because, again, we along the way have started managing several clothing accounts. If you go and check out the video on how we advertise variations, there's a very specific reason why we will approach things the way that we do. And it's because we've started managing very large and very complex accounts. And that has led us to sort of a more scalable and like optimized way of doing things that has been very, very helpful for us in product lines where there's a lot of inventory issues, meaning like it's impossible to keep in the black mediums in clothing. Like everybody wants the black medium. So you're always going to end up with those particular scenarios. And in that case, if we only have a single ASIN that is advertised in the campaign, if that ASIN goes out of stock, then the campaign essentially pauses and we might end up sort of shooting ourselves in the foot. And then we gotta like scramble to add in the other variation. I would not advertise more than one parent ASIN or products that are in more, separate listings in the same campaign if I can help it. The reason why is because if you think of it from a traffic direction perspective, whenever we are advertising a particular variation, it's still being funneled to the same place or the same listing. And then the shoppers could then choose to say, click around into whatever variation makes sense for them. However, if we are funneling traffic to separate listings, like that traffic is going different places. And the problem you have with when you group things like that is you have a much less control over how much your spend is going to those two different, you can think of them sort of as landing pages in a way. So if I have one product line that I want to dial up on and one product line I want to dial down on, then I'm kind of stuck in that case, versus if I kept everything separate and clean, then it would be much, much better. Cool. Walter said, thank you for the detailed answer. It is my pleasure, honestly. I love these conversations. So yeah, anyone listening in, feel free to type an Amazon ad question in the chat. We'll make sure that we get those answered for you. I'm gonna take a sip of water and then I will answer this next question. So I'm gonna have to pull up our YouTube video again and show you exactly where the YouTube or what the YouTube videos look like, because I actually have a video on this. There's pros and cons to each approach. So the question is, when starting a new campaign, is it more effective to begin with a high bid and then lower it, or to start with a low bid and increase it gradually for better results? It's really weighing the pros and cons of each. So the pro of starting with the high bid and then working your way down is you're going to get the data feedback much, much quicker. It's going, you're going to have better vetting of that if it's an actually good keyword for you because you've spent sufficiently on it. However, if you do it that way, then you typically have much higher ad spend out of the gate. Versus the other way of starting low and working way up, it's sort of the flip side of that. Typically, the ad spend isn't going to be as significant in those cases. However, you don't get data feedback. It could take you much, much longer. And so in the case of a launch where you really want to hit it out of the gate and get things going, sometimes those launches can struggle if you start too low and you're not aggressive enough. So it's a bit of a pros and cons. So what we will do in those cases is we will sort of weigh the pros and cons of each approach and say, okay, so in this scenario with this new product launch, we have limited inventory anyways. We are not, it's not as important for us to like shotgun it out of the gate, and maybe our ad spend budgets are just a lot lower. So in that case, starting with lower bids is going to make a little bit more sense. However, if we are we really have a specific sales goal in mind for a particular product launch. The client is very, very adamant. All I care about is getting a really good BSR. We want to hit it as hard as we can out of the gate. In those cases, starting with a low bid is not going to be the right strategy. And also, other fun fact, which is not something that you asked, but when you're starting a new campaign, if we're in a launch, we prefer fixed bids for those campaigns. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me see if I can get the YouTube video up here. This is the video. I pretty much go over that again, slightly more detail. So it's like how to set your starting bids for Amazon campaigns is the one I was talking about. And then the one for variation, how to increase sales, the best variation ad strategy. Yeah, again, we have a lot of experience in clothing. So that has been very helpful for us. It's kind of, we've drafted a lot of strategies out of that. So I highly, highly recommend going and watching those two, because again, I hopefully got a pretty good answer this go around, but if you want it like a little bit more in depth, or at least something that you can rewatch, I would recommend going and checking that out. Cool. I appreciate all of the questions. Again, just a quick recap. If anyone has any Amazon ad questions, make sure that you type them in the chat. If we have enough time to get to 1 o'clock, I'll be here till 1 o'clock. If we end up running a little bit thin on questions, I know we're at kind of a weird, actually, I appreciate everyone showing up, because the 28th, this kind of weird week in between New Year's and after Christmas always gets a little funky. So I wasn't sure how many questions we'd get today, but if we have enough to fill it up till 1, then I'll make sure that I'm here and get everyone your answers. But otherwise, we might end up a little bit early this week as well. But anyways, continuing on the theme of adjusting after the peak season. So now, and actually going into January, one of the things that we find is that there's a lot of things that get increased in December for good reason, right? If we're looking at the account, if we're doing our general optimizations, if we're optimizing in the way that we should be, what we should be doing is looking at the things, okay, what is performing? And then we're looking to maximize that as much as possible in the terms of bids or budgets. Now, just due to the variations in shopper searches and just a little bit how the algorithm displays and what is bringing in the volume of sales. The one thing that we've noticed is a lot of things, automatic campaigns, broad match campaigns, categories, all of the above, tend to work very, very well in December. And oftentimes what happens is that the bids and budgets for these campaign types get scaled, meaning increased, which again, for good reason. For example, we had a client where we were analyzing what performed the best in December, because we wanted to be able to do some analysis and then anticipate those increases and get ahead of it when we went into, the next Q4. And what we discovered is that the best performing keyword, now this was a baby product, but the best performing keyword in December by far was the search term baby. Go figure. It is a very broad keyword. It is nothing I would ever really recommend going after. However, the performance in terms of sales and ACoS, they had a sub 10% ACoS on a keyword that was that competitive and that broad. But of course, because of the good performance, sales, and ACoS, that keyword got extensively increased during the month of December, as it should. It helped drive insane performance, and we're able to sustain a bestseller badge off of it. However, what happens is post-peak season, Christmas, right after, those things that have performed phenomenally for you in peak season December are going to all of a sudden not perform at all. And there will be a decrease in the spend naturally just due to the decrease in the clicks happening on the platform. So this is a really simple way to think about it, but your ad spend is determined by two things: the number of clicks multiplied by the cost per click. So it's how many people are clicking, what am I paying when a person is clicking, right? And so that, because there's a lot of clicks happening, your spend is going to increase. But often, again, because we're increasing bids to capitalize on that good performance, we're also seeing cost per clicks increase. While your spend will probably naturally decrease due to just, again, not as many shoppers on the platform. There are not as many people shopping for gifts. However, oftentimes our cost per click still stay pretty high because the market, a lot of people haven't brought down their bids yet. They're not as reactive. Sometimes tools, depending on the date ranges that they're looking on, it takes them a while to really equalize the accounts for this new change in performance. And so what often happens is we continuously sustain high cost per click on things that no longer make sense for us to be that aggressive on. And if you don't go through and correct this in your accounts, that's why oftentimes when people come off December, if you've been around the block enough, you know that, and logically, like January's sales numbers are not going to be as elevated as December. Like, let's just be honest here. But oftentimes what happens is people will see a sharp spike in ACoS and then it's not going back down. And again, if you're looking at longer date ranges, if you're doing your general optimization, if you're not getting super in the weeds, nitty gritty on your account, then you probably will see that sustained poor performance. And there's a lot of people who go looking for answers in January because they haven't really, again, dug in and made those optimizations that are necessary in their accounts for that post peak season and all of the stuff that worked and it got an increase. And sometimes, depending on your optimization principles, you might be decreasing things gradually, which again, generally makes so much sense. And I would 100% agree with that philosophy. However, there's sometimes where it's really important to make very significant and drastic changes because things have been increased so exponentially that small incremental changes are not going to decrease things as much as they need to be decreased. And so you're going to end up with really high ACoS that kind of goes down versus being able to significantly correct for those trends. One thing to look at really, really closely, especially if you have high spend on broad match autos, etc., is your search term reports. Very, very often there will be search terms in there that have started performing really, really well. And then if you look at them, again, look in your search term tabs post peak season, what you will find is that those search terms have continuously gotten a lot of spend because, again, they were working, but right now they're not working. And so you really need to, again, decrease that in your account. Often a lot of negative keywords are needed to fix things. Here's a nice comment. Always enjoyed reading your content to learn something new about Amazon advertising. Yes, I post a lot of content on LinkedIn. Looks like you're watching us on LinkedIn. So I appreciate you always tuning in. Hopefully the content sounds like it's helping. That's definitely my goal with these things. All right, quick question. Following Christmas and holiday season, both PPC sales and ops have experienced a decline. Yep, across many brands. It's going to happen. It is happening across all of our accounts as well. It is something that always happens and will continuously happen, again, due to changes in consumer behavior and very drastic and sudden changes in consumer behavior. What specific strategies would you suggest to boost sales in the days following Christmas? I mean, you can't fight the market. That's what I would say. And anyone who thinks they can fight the market, that is a recipe for drops in profitability. So, I mean, I would take a look at what is driving sales. So when you're making your optimizations, and I'm saying like decrease these things, you need to add negatives, you need to decrease your bids, you definitely want to insulate the things that are working. And if your ACoS has spiked significantly, but it's something that is still generating sales, like you do want to make sure you're not overcorrecting. So what we'll do on, say, our main keywords or our main campaigns is we will sort of give what we call like a ACoS allowance, or is like, okay, so my ACoS target's like 35%, but it's running at 45%. Like, I know that's 10 points above where I'm supposed to be, but I know that consumer conversion rates are significantly low right now, which means that ACoS is just going to be high, conversion rates go down, ACoS goes up. That's the dynamic. And so I would say be careful of over optimizing and screwing yourself in terms of sales, but specific strategies to boost sales, I don't really think I have any, other than, you might just increase everything that you're seeing is still continuously driving sales for the brand. Again, this post-Christmas. But I wouldn't fight it. Every single time we've tried to fight like a market trend. So for example, we had an account where we worked, it had a very sudden, it was like Mother's Day products that worked really, really well. And so what we did is, like a month prior to Mother's Day, what we did is we worked to increase the organic ranking for that particular product at a very high ACoS and total ACoS. And this was something the client was perfectly okay with, because we were running, it was actually a really awesome account to work on, because he was okay with doing some really amazing and aggressive testing. However, because sales consequently spiked, we had record sales for Mother's Day. Worked phenomenal. However, the problem is that because we had to sustain such high ad spend at essentially a loss, like a month prior to, we ended up with, overall, if you averaged everything out, there really wasn't much of a net profit. And that was because, again, we're trying to fight the market trends and rank on things and be aggressive on things where there just wasn't enough consumer behavior or enough like sales volume all through those search terms to really even make sense. So what we did the next year, we corrected for that. And instead of trying to push for sales months in advance, what we did is we simply looked at the consumer behavior and the trends in terms of the search volumes increased. And then we pretty much rode that wave. And what that allowed us to do is, again, we had significant increase in the significant increase in the sales increases. Sales were records again that year, but our performance or profitability on that was worlds better. Great. Amazing in terms of profit, because we simply worked within the market and rode the wave of the market. So I would say, in terms of, I know that's not a really great answer. I wish I could give you like, oh yeah, just put these coupons and, run these types of campaigns and all this stuff and, everything's going to work out. In all honesty, you really want to optimize for whatever you can given the current market. The minute you try and fight against the market or the trends is the minute you start losing in terms of profits. Now, if you're okay with dumping a bunch of profits because you want to say, hey, sales are fine, more power to you. But I would just make sure that you're keeping both top and bottom line in mind when making those changes. Yep. So thanks again, and happy holidays. Thanks to you, and happy holidays as well. Looking forward to going off into the new year with a bang. So, which, by the way, for anyone tuning in, I did ask over on LinkedIn, and I might ask again here. I don't know if I got any feedback last week. I'm thinking of testing different start times for this. So I know I'm doing it from 12 to 1, with 12 to 1 my time. I thought about starting it at 3 or later for other ones. So I would, anyways, if anyone has any feedback as to, start times or different times for these, I would appreciate it. Cool. Another question. What strategy can we adopt to enhance ROAS? Just really good ad spend control. Honestly, if we're strictly talking about advertising optimizations, we're not talking about anything else. Your ROAS is determined by how many sales you get for the ad spend. And really the thing that you're controlling is the ad spend. On Amazon, the sales are controlled really by the conversion rates of the product. Your goal is to drive the most efficient and effective traffic with your ad spend. So in all honesty, it's I'm going to make it sound super simplistic. I do appreciate that the nuts and bolts and the how-tos can get very complicated. However, at the end of the day, what it is you are spending more on the stuff that is working well meaning driving sales and it's at a good ROAS, and you are lowering the spend on the stuff that is not driving sales. So primarily optimizing things like, say, for negative keywords, things that are not converting well for the product, negating those. And then you also want to be significantly adjusting bids on things that have clicks and no sales. And how many clicks is relative to the conversion rates of the product. If you want to figure out how many clicks on average it takes for you to convert to a sale, you take 1 divided by the conversion rate in decimal form. So for example, if you have a 10% conversion rate, that'd be 1 divided by 0.1. So that's 10% in decimal. And that's going to give you 10. So on average, it takes you 10 clicks to generate an order. So, if you see a keyword that has 15 clicks and no orders, then you can say, well, that would be above, 15 clicks is well above that 10 clicks on average it takes me to generate an order. So these are going to vary by keyword, but we kind of like to look at it relative to the actual product performance, which can be helpful because if you have something with, say, a 2% conversion rate, which would be really, really low, it is possible to have those things in, say, the clothing space where people get really, really picky. Then optimizing off of 15 clicks. On average for a 2% conversion rate, it takes you 50 clicks to get an order. So you might be optimizing too quickly, which would be careful. So hopefully that answered your question. You had a follow-up question. So if you want to type any other clarifications or further questions that my last answer brought up, let me know. Your question is, which metric is more significant for PPC campaigns, ACoS, TACoS, or ROAS? So ACoS and ROAS are pretty much the same. They're just the opposite of each other. So ACoS is ad spend divided by ad sales, and then ROAS is the polar opposite of that. So it's ad sales divided by ad spend. So as far as like ACoS or ROAS, I would just pick the one that makes the most sense for you. So if the brand has been natively selling on Amazon for a long time, they probably speak in terms of ACoS. If they're used to like Google Ads or other pay-per-click platforms, then they're going to be much more comfortable with ROAS. So I mean, as far as ACoS or ROAS, it's really just which one allows you to make the most sense of what you're seeing is what I would say. Now, in terms of, ACoS/ROAS or total ACoS, I would say total ACoS is going to be a much more significant metric. I just had sort of an internal call with one of our newer team members today, and we were going over the trends in the account. And I said, hey, look, optimize for total ACoS. I wouldn't be worried about ACoS as much as I would total ACoS, because your total ACoS is going to be much more relational to the actual profits of the account. And let's be honest, client cares about sales. Are sales going up? Do I have more sales? And how much money am I getting on those sales? Doesn't matter if sales are going up. If their money that is being funneled into the bank account is going down, that is not a good scenario. And so if you have total ACoS that's continuously increasing, most likely you're seeing less in terms of profits. And so that would be something that I would look into. Now, the one thing that I will say is you do really need both. The reason why is because when it comes to making optimizations inside of your ad console, you can't get total ACoS on a per keyword level. I wish you could. If you could, you can make much more informed optimizations, but you really can't. So when it comes to optimizing particular keywords, you want to keep in mind your strategy and the goal of that campaign. And then we still would use ACoS to sort of determine if something's making sense for us. Again, if we're just looking inside the ad console. So again, hopefully that answer helped out. If you have any follow-up questions to anything I said, feel free to type it in the chat. Let me know. But that was a really good question, because it's kind of like, chicken or the egg, which one should I look at? Which one should be more important? And to be honest, if you're really there are sort of North stars and guiding stars and things that have a little bit more impact on the account. You know, that whole ACoS, total ACoS thing. Like I said, if I had to pick one, I would say total ACoS. But if I'm not even allowed to look at ACoS, like, I don't know, those conversations where it's like, oh, if I only had to look at one thing, I could completely get rid of all of these data points. And I'm like, well, you know, if you've gun to my head, if I had to choose one, total ACoS. But really, when it comes down to it, you need all the metrics. Any metric you're not viewing is one that you're missing something contextually on the account. So, good question. So I optimize PPC on a weekly basis. What date range would I consider to adjust bids based on ACoS 30 days to the last 7 days? Someday ACoS was in the target range when filtered by the month, but out. So we sort of take a hybrid, like, middle road of these. You can also use 14 days is what we would often use. So there are pros and cons to each. And the one thing that we found is that if you look at shorter date ranges, you figure out what's happening now. But sometimes if you're only looking at, say, 14 days in our example, maybe something has gotten, you know, to the point of maybe 15 clicks in a 30-day period. But if we only ever look at 14 days, we're missing out on a lot of that data set that could, again, kind of highlight things that we should be optimizing. But then again, to your point, if you only look at long date range, 30 days, then you're not seeing what's happening right now. And sometimes you're like, oh, things look great. And they're really not over the last, you know, days or weeks. And so what we will do is we'll look at a 14-day window for our general optimizations, meaning what's working, let's increase it, what's not working, let's decrease it. And then we also, on another day of the week, will look at a longer date range. So say last 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. And then we'll say, okay, what are all of the things that have enough data to make a decision on? So these are primarily clicks with no sales, or things that have significant amount of clicks, only say 1 to 2 orders, and the ACoS is like crazy. Crazy being like 100% over for most of our accounts. Unless, for example, the account's running at like overall 80% or like a, I don't know, 60% ACoS, because then we're in supplements and maybe we go up to like 120. So again, things are very relative. But again, we're looking at this longer date range to go, okay, if we were only looking at the shorter date range, what poor performing targets might we have missed because we're not gaining that broader perspective? So what we found is that if we do both, right? So it's like pros and cons, weigh the pros and cons. Is there an optimization sequence that I could use that could get rid of the majority of the cons? And so that's what we've chosen to do. So hopefully that was helpful and explained. Mohammed said, thanks. I appreciate it. Thanks for your questions. They were really, really good questions. So love. Sorry, this is the only thing about doing this is I almost lose my voice every time. So hopefully this has been super, super informative. If there are any last minute questions, I think we have about 5 minutes to go on this thing. So feel free to type your Amazon ad questions in the chat. A couple minutes left to go. We'll get those answered, but otherwise, I will see you all next week, same time, same place for now. Again, I might switch it up. If you have any feedback for me as far as like time frames or anything else, or if there's anyone you would love to see, potentially think about bringing on some guests to the show. So we will see. And then if anyone wants to view a recording of this or recordings of any of the past lives, because I've been doing this for a bit, you are always welcome to check out the live. So again, quite a few of these we've done, and I intend to just keep adding to this as we go on into the new year. Hopefully looking to, again, just really ramp up what we're doing in terms of content. So if anyone has any Amazon ad questions or content pieces that they really wish there was something out there, always feel free to hit me up on all of the social channels. Probably the best place to hit me up is going to be on my LinkedIn. So if you are able to check me out, I guess, oh, lives are happening now at the top of people's profiles. Didn't know that. Learning something new every day. Awesome. Yeah, but I would recommend checking me out on LinkedIn. If you're able to, feel free to shoot me a message. Depending on the message, if it's just like a general question or, hey, can I get a job? I typically don't answer those ones just because I get a pretty high volume of them. But I try and zero out my inbox whenever possible. So if you guys have a suggestion or a comment, especially on anything we're doing in terms of content, feel free to shoot me over a message, and I will always love interacting with you all. So awesome. Well, it looks like we're at the end of our questions. So I'm going to close this out. But yeah, if you guys have any questions throughout the week, feel free to leave comments under this or any of the other YouTube videos. And I will see you all next time. Same time, same place.